There we go. Just make this work. All right. Matt, alcoholic, and thank you so much for inviting me. Hey, Seth. It's good to see you. Love you too, buddy. All right, cool. Thank you, Tommy Lee, for asking me, John, for the recommendation. And it's a pretty awesome experience and an honor to be here on your anniversary, because it's 2 years. That's amazing. So congratulations, happy birthday to the home group, Three Legacies. And thank you so much for this gift. It means a lot. It means a lot to me to be invited to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, but especially to participate in your home group. It's a very sacred thing for my recovery. And I can see that love in your eyes and in your actions for yours too. My sobriety date's May 1st of 2008. My home group kickoff isn't until noon, and it meets Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. down the road in Franklin at the Williamson Medical Center, the hospital there, and we meet, I said, at 8 a.m. We'd love to have you. If you show up, plan to stick around for a meeting after the meeting. We'll have some pancakes at the cafe right next door. It's a good thing. And I have a sponsor. John can validate that. He knows he's my sponsor, which is a really important thing. And having had a sponsor who didn't, it works much better this way. And I also had the privilege of passing on what I've been given to other guys, and I have a handful of guys who call me sponsor, and I'll tell you what, I'd say these are some of the most cherished relationships that I have in my life today. That and a loving God of the second tradition, who I will call God from here on out. I'd say these are relationships I've received after coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that I was looking for, and now I couldn't live without. And it's a really good deal. It is a really good deal. I'm not the type of alcoholic who figured out I had a problem, came to my first meeting, and have been an active home group member ever since. I'm a little slower study, and I liked the effects produced by alcohol and would tolerate the consequences until I couldn't any longer. But before going into the solution, I just want to touch down on some of my thought patterns when I was young. I don't remember this, but my mom's told me a few years back that I came up to her at about 3 years old, dead serious as a 3-year-old can be, and demanded to know where my real family was, where my real mom and my dad were. And she was laughing too, but I don't know where that thought comes from. That was implanted in me. I came out of the factory with that, and I've done the research. They are who they say they are, but I can't explain that. I just had this feeling that I didn't belong, even to that family unit that was closest to me. And that carried on through grade school and even my friends. I had friends, I played sports, and on the outside, I had, like a good, loving support and all of that stuff. But inside, there was something missing. I just couldn't quite feel like you guys were on, or that we were all on the same team. And that, like I said, that went on through my childhood, and I had a lot of fear. I remember staying up late at night, going through these scenarios in my head that would ultimately never happen, but they were so real at the time that I would literally work myself up into crying and be bawling as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and these things would never even come to fruition. All of that stuff's very interesting, doesn't quite necessarily make me an alcoholic, but I know these feelings of apartness and separation from are common amongst us, and I found something to cure that, and it was in the form of vodka. We found, me and my buddy, my best friend at the time, we found his mom's stash of vodka above the washing and dryer machine. And I could take you back to the house. I could take you back to the tree, which we would ultimately go out, into the woods and consume this vodka. And I could take you back to that very place where something happened. And for me, it was just a release. It was that breath, that deep breath from deep within, where everything was just okay. All of a sudden, all of my family were who they say they were. My friends were good people. My classmates, they all were tolerable. And we were all finally, playing on the same team, speaking the same language. I could finally breathe. And really, that's all I wanted from alcohol. I just wanted to breathe. I just wanted to be okay. I didn't want to, the blackouts and waking up, not knowing where I was, the car crashes, the terrible relationships, the selfish and self-centered destruction that it ultimately ended taking me down. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to be okay. And I found okay right around that 3 to 4 drink. And things were good. At 12 years old, I had very limited resources to that third drink. So I had to get clever and get smart. And I always thought I was a pretty smart kid. So we ended up stealing as much from his mom as we could. Then we moved over to my parents and raided their stash, started connecting, building our network, with the older kids. And this was before LinkedIn. It was just, it was all about, face-to-face interactions. Hey, mister was a common game we played where you had to get what you needed to get from the store. And I was a smart kid. Couldn't do it every day, but man, I couldn't wait to do it again. I just remember that, couldn't wait. And the consequences were it was a low-risk operation at 12, 13, 14, it was slaps on the wrist, if anything. And it didn't really start progressing on the outside until I could drive, because I found I liked to travel after I started drinking. And that ended up turning into some, just some higher consequences, I'll just say. Car crashes, run-ins with the law. One night in particular, was leaving the pre-party on the way to the party. Had a brand new car. My parents got me because at this time, I'm in high school. I'm really talented at sports. I've trained hard my whole life. I'm on the way to Division I school, as long as I stay healthy and continue going. So my parents, being great enablers and just loving parents, buy me a brand new car, and all they did was ever love me the best they knew how. They came from nothing and alcoholic homes on one side, so I don't blame them at all for the love that they gave me. But I'm driving from the pre-party on the way to the party in this brand new car and have it full with people. And I go blazing through this stop sign and come crashing down into an embankment. And my first instinct is to get out of the car and run down the road, obviously. I got to get away from this. But the door's jammed up, so I jump out the side window like a NASCAR driver and start running down the road. And this is in Durham County, North Carolina, and it's pitch black. And I get down about 10 feet. I can't see my hand in front of my face, and so I stop. And then it's only at that point that I turn around and look back at the carnage that just happened with my car and thought about somebody else other than me, because that's what I do. I'm 16 years old, and it's just about me. I'm self-will run riot to the extreme. When I hit a wall or an embankment, I run the other way. By the grace of God, nobody was seriously hurt in that accident. I go back and check, and thankfully there was another fella who was following us from the pre-party who had nobody in his station wagon, so we all piled into his car, went on down to the party, tied off a few when I got there, called home, because this was back when we didn't have cell phones and had to call landline. I said, "Mom, you wouldn't believe what happened. Somebody stole my car." She says, "I don't think so. The police are already here. You better get your butt back to the accident. I'll be there in, 20 minutes. Uh-oh. So we go back to the accident. I meet 2 deputy sheriffs down there, and they say, "Son, have you had anything to drink tonight?" And without just skipping a beat, I said, "Officer, I'm going to be honest, I had one drink, but this was after the accident." He said, "Son, that's a great answer." I said, "I know it is. I don't even know where it came from. It's just like right out." And that's how I was with me. I could tell you what I needed to tell you to get what I needed to get so I could get on down the road. And due to me being so smart, I got a slap on the wrist. And that was it. Fast forward 3 months later, my car is no longer in use, so I borrow my parents' car. I get my first drink out in public. I had this plan. I don't know if you guys are planners. I had a plan. Had the shirt I was going to wear. I knew the drinks I was going to order. This was my first. This is a big deal. I'm 17 years old now. I'm stepping into a private club. I'm gonna have a good night. The way that night ended, it was the first night I saw flashlights in the side mirror at a stop sign, and followed up by a police officer coming and telling me to pull over, which I didn't do to his liking. So I ended up going to jail that night for the first time. My first night in jail was not a pleasurable experience. I did not enjoy the amenities that they had, and coming from 400 thread counts to a cot was not cutting it. So I did what I did when I got into trouble. I called home and I said, "Hey," my dad picked up the phone. He says, "Hello?" It's like, "Hey, you wouldn't believe what happened." And he says, "I'm sleeping." Click. That was not the response I was looking for, but that's exactly what I got. And I got out of that jail, in a day or two later, and my plan was, who's going to drive me around now? Because I don't have a car, and now they're going to take my license. So naturally, it's like, okay, where's my transportation coming from? Not at all did I think that maybe this alcohol should be looked at, this lifestyle around it. I'm all about changing my surroundings to fit my disease. And I did that very successfully. As a result of that DUI, and this is at 17, and I guess I was maybe right at 2000, in 2000 or late 90s, DUIs weren't as severe as they are now, but I ended up having to go to take this drug and alcohol assessment. For those of you who haven't taken them, they're like a standardized test for your partying lifestyle. And I thought I was a smart kid, so I was going to pass the test. Well, I ended up failing it, or passing it, depending on which side you're on. And they end up, as a result, sending me to A&A. It's like, what's the A&A? Like Alcoholics Anonymous. This is what you got to do. This is your penance for your DUI. And I was like, well, I'm going to go and do what I need to do to get what I need to get so I can get on down the road and figure out who's going to drive me around. I got a ride to my first AA meeting, 17 years old. It was in the basement of a church, somewhere in Raleigh. I don't know where it was, in North Carolina. And I go into this, I open the doors, and I get hit with this plume of smoke that comes right out. And I'm thinking this place might be on fire. There's so much smoke going on in here. Or as a nice, seedy bar. But sure enough, nobody was running out, and there's people in it, and I heard laughter. And I saw some figures in there. It's so smoky, I couldn't really tell. But I walk right down the aisle, and sure enough, as I get closer, there's people, and they're in there, and they're old. I mean, like, really, really old. Grandma and grandpa, like Tales from the Crypt, like sitting in there, just waiting for me to come in and attack me with their pleasantries and cookies and nice coffee. And they were really sweet, just like grandma and grandpas are, and said, "Oh, wow, welcome, glad you're here." And I'm like, well, I'm glad you're here, first of all, because it's much better than driving around with your big Cadillacs all over and killing us on the roads. And I just had this thing of like, Alcoholics Anonymous was for you. It's for the people who were unable to drink successfully. I just had a couple run-ins with the law and some driving issues. I have a transportation problem. I don't really have a drinking problem. So I took your cookies and I took the coffee and the very nice hospitality from these older people who very well could be like, in their 50s. And I said, thank you, thank you very much. I'm good. Thanks for the information. Like I said, I'm not a quick study when it comes to this disease. Not as smart as I thought it was. What I've learned since is that this disease doesn't really care how smart you are, how young you are, how old you are. It's going to take you down slowly and on its terms. Until I threw up the white flag, and that took several more what I could call bottoms. I'd always look for bottoms as what I'm losing on the outside, and as long as I had a job, as long as I had cars in the driveway, nice things, like I couldn't be an alcoholic, I couldn't surrender. Why would I surrender? I got bankrolls. I have more money than I can spend. I can travel. I can do anything I want to do. Why would I not continue to drink, despite the consequences? And I thought as long as I could continue to keep this up, no matter how far this went down, like it would balance itself out, and that worked for a while. I'm 17 years old, though. I still haven't finished high school. Fast forward 2 years, now I moved from the middle part of the state out to the mountains because this was a judge, it was either that or go to jail, and I'm like, hey, I'm on the move. I'll do one of those geographical changes, and so I found exactly what I was looking for out in the mountains, except it was better quality, and I didn't need as much. I found moonshine out there, found a good connection, and I was just drinking very economically at this point in my life. It was a good deal. I didn't realize it at the time, but subconsciously I was passing out quarts to my friends to have, knowing that they wouldn't drink it so that it would be there when I came over. It's like, hey, let's get that moonshine out in the freezer. They didn't realize it, but I knew it was just where we left it the last time. He was such a nice fellow. The last thing I had tried to do in order to control and enjoy my drinking, this was at the end. I want to tell you one quick story. When I was 19 now, I still hadn't finished school. I'm making money. I don't think I need to actually finish school or go to school because I'm under this delusion that I can wrest satisfaction out of life if only I manage it well. And as long as things on the outside are good, I'm okay. Leave me alone. I'm dying on the inside, but it looks fun on the outside. Snowboarding in the winter times and in the spring and summer months in the mountains, we would ride these longboards. They're like longer skateboards. Shredding down this hill, come down to the end of this stop sign, blow right through it. I don't remember what happens, but I tried to power slide. The last thing I can recall would be at the bottom to power slide in order to stop, but end up hitting the head to concrete, going really, really fast. And thankfully, my roommate at the time was there, saw it, called the ambulance. They scooped me up off the ground, took me to urgent trauma. Was basically dead on arrival, and my parents get the phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning because they were in the vicinity at this time. And they get that phone call no parent wants, and they say, come down to the hospital, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I suffered traumatic brain injury. They induced a coma and told them that over the next 72 hours, it's a waiting game. We don't know. And in order to prevent aneurysm, they did some open head surgery way beyond the scope of my intellect, but it was really a major deal. My parents did what they'd done, most of my life, and that's just, they just prayed. And I'm not asking you what to believe, but I believe that as a result of their prayers and prayers of other people, that the doctor came out a couple days later and was like, something happened here that medicine can't explain. And my brain went all the way from one side of my head, my abnormal, back to dead center. And they couldn't understand why or how. But we'll give credit where credit's due, and I thank my parents for those prayers. I thank my mom for every single prayer that she ever and continues to give for me, because God, I needed them. After getting stable, I still had lots of learning how to like walk and talk and do all those basic things that like we take for granted. And about 4, maybe 6 weeks later, I get discharged. My buddy picks me up, passes me a flask and one of those medicinal cigarettes that aren't quite legal in the state yet. And without like even a thought, I tip it up and we're right back off to it. I don't have the defense against the first drink. See, I used to think that, this powerlessness over alcohol and my life being unmanageable had to do with me just never being able to drink again, which is just a very depressing thought if you're new. Don't worry, we just do this thing one day at a time. But what that first step means to me today, and as a result of several of these bottoms, is that I don't have the choice not to drink again. And if I start, I don't know what's going to happen next. This is important information for me because I tried to control and enjoy this drinking even after this. Now I have prescription stuff that allows me to drink a lot less, but I'm developing, patterns and behaviors that are, being dependent on things outside of myself, things other than God that ultimately will bring me some peace. So from the 19 until the very end of my drinking, it was very dark, and I'm not going to go into the details, but I started doing things that I'd say I'd never do with people I never thought I'd be hanging out with, and ultimately just broke every principle and value that I was taught in that good home, and tried to push everybody away, all of the coaches, all of my parents and friends and families, everybody, just leave me alone, let me go. The last thing that I did, my last ditch effort to get help was at the very end, I was hanging out with this sordid group of people. We didn't come out during the daylight. We're kind of like vampires. And this young lady had just got out of prison. She was looking really good, and I felt like, well, the thing is I felt like I could trust her. It made sense to me, right? I mean, she was living on the dark side too, so I figured let's do this. And me and Bonnie, we would run together for the next 2 years, and I started going to jail a lot more. I'm not going to blame her. I was definitely a willing participant in that relationship, but it took me down to another level. And ultimately, on May 1st of 2008, my plan was to go home to say goodbye to my mom and my dad, or my dog. My dad wouldn't, he already cut me off, but I was going to go say goodbye to those people, an animal, my mom, and just say goodbye and leave the state and leave the country, because I'd done too much. I'd made too many bad steps in the wrong direction to ever feel like the state would forgive me. So I was going to run. I was doing what I was doing when I was 12 years old. It's not as cute when you're 23, and the consequences were up. The fire was there, and I'm sitting. I call in at the gate. They lived in a gated community, and I punched in at the gate, my mom, to let me in. She hadn't heard from me in several weeks, so she was happy. Opened the gate. I go in, and then inside the gate there's this undercover. They pull out some weapons, tell me to get out of the car. I get out of the car, get in the back of their car. This is a very common thing that's happening. As I'm in the back of their car, all of a sudden this mountain street gets flooded with undercover agents, and then there's a dog in the back of my car that's not my dog. And it was like my world was starting to just unfold real quick. And then my mom comes down this mountain road, talks with one of those agents, and drives by me in the back of this car, and I see the looks in her face, and it looks like she was standing over her son's casket. It's the only thing I could relate it to. She was just sullen and pale and tired. I mean, who knows? She hadn't heard from me so long. I don't know how she could have been sleeping. And something inside of me broke at that very moment. And and I cried out to a God that I was sure didn't want much to do with me based on my track record, and I just said, I can't live like this anymore, please help me. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. And the first thing that came to my mind after I cried out that prayer, and I don't know if that was out loud or just inside my belly, but it was those people in AA. It was those nice, kind people in Alcoholics Anonymous, because you guys have showed up in a lot of places that I couldn't get out of between my first meeting at 17 and now at 23. You're weird. You just show up in these hospitals and jails, and you're always there. It's like, okay. And you made an impression on me. So much so that the answer to this prayer, and I've prayed a lot of prayers since then, and very few, if any, have ever been answered this loudly. And it was like, AA, that's your way out. And so I was like, all right. And I'd love to tell you that from that day on, I've been a good home group member and made coffee ever since. But our literature and our program talks about setting right the wrongs, about the restitution of the past. And that's what I had to do. And at 23 years old, I go and they take me to a federal detention facility. I'm facing 929 months for a series of events that have happened over the last 2 weeks, compounded over the last 2 years. And that was my early sobriety, was with that sitting over my head. 23 hours and 50-minute lockup each day for the first few weeks. And I used to get out to make a phone call. I didn't have anybody to call. I'd just sit there and, pretend like I was talking to somebody. But I don't, thinking that they, now knowing they knew I wasn't talking to anybody because they're listening, but I thought I was clever. And I will never forget, though, and the reason I'm here, partly and the reason I'm here today is because a man came to a jail. Again, you guys were fearless. After I went through my classification and I got a little more freedom, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous came to a jail with a big book, and we had a meeting. And in those very first meetings, I don't remember a single thing that was said, but I remember one thing. When he said he was going to be there, he was there. At the end of the meeting, he got into the elevator, went down to his family, his home, whatever, his dog, and I went back to my world, which was about the size of a coat closet. That's all I had. That's where this disease took me. But there was something here that was attractive. That message itself was attractive. So I tell you that for those of you who I know are involved in carrying the message behind the walls or into treatment centers or wherever you may, it's not so much about what you say, but just being there makes a big difference. I knew something had to change, and for reasons yet, I can only explain as love. My dad ended up my parents ended up refinancing the house or something, coming up with a lot of money to get a good lawyer, and I ended up just doing under 2 years in the state prison. It was, I wouldn't suggest it. Not a very fun place to be, terrifying to be exact. 23 years old, going into a place where people aren't coming home, was definitely terrifying. But I found Alcoholics Anonymous. I found a home group. I learned about a home group. I learned about the importance of the 3 legacies. More would be revealed as I continue the path due to the limitations that we had, but I come on the tales of people like Tom I, who planted seeds in North Carolina prison system so that I had something to eat when I came through. And for that, I could never repay this debt of gratitude. He had I could see the work that he had laid down, in the facilities that I was at, some more than others, but as soon as I went through processing, I knew I had to find a sponsor because this whole time I've been trying to do it myself and failing miserably. So I reached out. Probably some of the hardest stuff that we have to do in here, at least in my experience, has been going up to another man and saying, I don't know how to stay sober. Will you help me? That's just talk about deflating, and just embarrassing. Golly. But I had lost it. I had lost all hope of doing this thing by myself. And I'd say like one of the things that's different for me today, as any other time that I've come in and around you beautiful people in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I don't have a plan B. Like if this thing here that we're doing right here, sharing our experience, strength, and hope, fellowship, cookies, if this stops working, if the loving God through the second tradition, through you, and if it stops working, like I don't have a plan B. Like I really don't. So I'm banking on it. So far, it has never let me down. I'm still the common denominator in most of all of my problems today. So I knew I had to lean into AA, and the way that I was instructed to do that was sponsorship. That's what we talk about here, right? So I was surveying the lay of the land. I mean, this is not a really friendly place to be in, but they did have meetings. You have to like go through a process of getting your name on the list in order to go. You can't just like, roll up anywhere. You have to, it's controlled movement, and, you get escorted. But man, I'll tell you, it was so nice to just be outside at night. I remember, even though I was in a single file line, walking with guards, with guns behind me and watching over me, like I was outside and I could see the stars, and I was on my way to my first like home group, and it was just so rewarding. I met my first sponsor actually outside of the meeting. I'd heard him share, he was really cool, but we ended up meeting in a class. When you go to prison, you either have to go to work or go to school. You can't just sit around. So I go and I meet my advisor, and he's like, do you want to go to work or go to school? And I was like, well, I want to go to work. I need some money. He's like, you can't go to work. You have to go to school. And I was like, well, why'd you ask me? He's like, well, what classes do you want to take? I was like, well, what do you have? And he's like, you got shop class, you have home ec, you can make food, you have horticulture, masonry. It's like, I'm hungry. I want to make, food. Put me in the kitchen. Sorry, that class is full. Well, what the heck? And that was kind of my experience working with sometimes the state employees, but that's not a they're great people, very patient, but my experience with trying to get things done was very frustrating. But here's how God worked it out. I ended up taking horticulture because I knew something about growing some closet tomatoes a long time ago, and I was like, well, if I can't make my food, I'll grow it myself. And I ended up meeting my sponsor, Terry, in a horticulture class. And this class also taught me so much more that I would later use. One of the main things is like, I got good grades when I did the work. Major revelation here. And when I showed up, because you don't have anything else to do besides go to class when you're locked up. So showing up, doing the work, Matt's getting good grades for the first time in his adult life. Wow. And I also learned a little bit about this process of plant growth, and that we're really just clearing the soil and doing a little bit of the outside work. But there is a power greater than Matt that's making this thing go from a seedling to a seed to a seedling. I can't explain it. I can't pull out the seedling from the seed. I just have to make an area for it to grow, give it an atmosphere to grow. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And it was in horticulture that I got to start talking with Terry, I would ask to be my sponsor. And Terry and we would sit out on the yard every weekend. He would read and I would listen. Crack open this book and he'd start reading, and I'm like, all right, that's good stuff. We talk about it, and it's like, hey, Terry, you want me to read? I know how to read. Just interject the sponsee suggestion, and Terry said in very loving words, which I won't repeat on the microphone, but I think you'd be better listening. Yes, sir. And I was so dependent on Terry for direction because I was terrified, not only of what was happening outside around in the air, but I was terrified of getting loaded, because there's more reason to get loaded inside than there was on the outside. And it was like a do or die type of a deal. I realized the grave nature of this disease, and I also saw something beautiful, because in our meetings inside Freedom Group, there were people sitting around a room much smaller than this, but probably 20, 30 guys, and these are Muslims and Hindu and all different types of races and religions, and we're sitting all around here, holding hands and praying together, a common prayer. We're out on the yard, they're separate. They're not talking. They can't talk. But inside of Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't see any of that. We're here for one common purpose. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what is this place? At some point in my step study with my sponsor, I was like, I'd really like a book, but I didn't want to I felt bad asking my parents for anything because I'd already asked so much. They got me a lawyer, and I just have been, I'm a taker, and I didn't want to be a taker anymore. And so Terry's like, there's an address in the back of the book. You can write it and see what happens. Ask him for a book. Sure enough, he was right. He knew that book pretty well. Black ink, box 459, New York, New York. Well, I don't have anything else to do. I'm going to write him a letter and let him know. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I get a call to the mailroom, and they're like, you got a package here. And sure enough, it was a big manila envelope from General Service Office. And in it was a handwritten letter from a woman. And she's like, Matt, sounds like you paid a high price for your drinking. My name's Gail. I'm an alcoholic. And we're glad that you reached out to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that day, that moment, the fact that there was a person outside of these walls that took the time to write me a letter and give me some literature, my world just got so much bigger. And I could never imagine, why would they do that? Come to find out, fast forward several years later, that was possible because somebody put $1 in a basket, probably in 2007. At that time, $1 was, probably like $5 now, and or a few, and that group was self-supporting, and they sent some money up to GSO, and GSO had the money to send a book to a guy like me, and if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. Where else? The difference between a miracle and magic is that magic is all about the human. That's the alcohol. For me, it was magic. Human can put a rabbit in a hat and pull out a handkerchief. That's cool. But that's not like the power that we get when we put $1 in the basket, and miracles can happen. So for me, I got this book, and I'm amped up. I'm like, Terry, you wouldn't believe what this pamphlet says. And I was going and trying to track him down on Sundays, and Sundays was a day that we didn't usually talk, and Terry said something to me that I'll never forget. He's like, Matt, it's really important that you find a life outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we are here. I was like, what? What? No, this is life. This is everything. If I don't do this, I don't have a life. He's like, that's correct. But the reason why we're getting sober is so that we can create a life and participate in life as citizens again outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the goal. And that blew my mind too. I'm used to hiding out in places when I'm scared, and I was hiding out in AA, and that's a safe place to hide out if you're ever on, trying to hide. But I said challenge accepted, so I started doing some other things outside of AA, like playing chess and reading and doing just a bunch of other things, and starting to create me. Like, who's Matt? I'd always been doing what everybody else is doing, just so long as you would think that I really liked it, what we were doing, so that I felt like a part of. I never really knew who I was or really what I liked. And so in this little suggestion, I've been given freedom to just figure out what it is. What do I like to do? And so yeah, I took that as a good suggestion and went out, and I've been able to do some amazing things. Fast forward to my next sponsor, because I had gone through steps 1 through 8 with Terry. There was one thing in my 4th step I wasn't going to share with him because I didn't want to stay in prison any longer. He was cool with it. We said, as soon as we find somebody in the clergy or a lawyer or somebody, the time we prayed on it. And it was going to be, understand that I would share it with them. And I had that opportunity at the next facility I was at. My sponsor also told me, my next guy, his name was Juan, and Juan said, these people on your 8-step list, you need to make amends to them now. If they're not going to come to visit you, you should write them a letter. So, okay, what do I say? Well, he said, lucky for you, the instructions are in the book. Let's point out the black ink. And I think a sponsor has a primary goal of taking us through the steps, but a secondary purpose of being a translator. And my sponsors have always been great translators, and I hope that I can translate too. And that is, what the black ink says on the page, and not what it doesn't say or what it could say or possibly the exception to, but just simply what's in the book. And Juan showed me exactly what I was supposed to say in my 9th step. It's a lot simpler than I was coming up with. Thank God for sponsorship. My mom was at the top of the list. She wasn't coming to see me, so I wrote her a letter. I said, Mom, I hadn't been the best son. I've been a horrible son. Done everything besides physically harm this woman. What can I possibly do to set things right today? My life depends on it. I sent the letter. I forgot I sent the letter. A week or two later, I get some mail. And I get this letter from my mom, and she says, Matt, the only thing that we've ever wanted from you is for you to love yourself like we've loved you this whole time. And I'll tell you, the floodgates opened, and I started bawling like a 5-year-old kid who was afraid that his dad wasn't going to come home from his business trip. And at that moment, I would have rather paid back the $5,000 I owed her for the stuff I stole than to love myself as. But thanks be to AA, and thanks to a loving God, I started to learn how to do that. And I look back at that amends request, and I think that that's all that God's ever wanted from me my whole life. Just to be one of his kids and to love myself like he's loved me this whole time. That's it. How do I do that? Hanging out with you, holding the door for people, saying please and thank you, and just being a kind person. That's it. I don't have to go off and, come up with cures to these diseases or anything. That's not my mission, at least it hasn't been today. But just be one of his kids and to try to love myself, like he's loved me this whole time. About a week after I got this amends and had shared my entire story with another human being, although they were two separate, I walk out onto the yard and I was alarmed because I didn't see anybody else out there, which is a sign that the yard may be closed. And if the yard's closed and you're out on it, you could be shot without warning. So I panicked for a moment, but then I looked further and I didn't see any of the fences, and the guard towers weren't there, and I'm starting to feel this warmth sensation come from the sun down from my head all the way down through my belly into my toes. And I stood there inside of this medium security prison of a free man. And I don't know how long I stood there, but I felt this power flowing through me. And I believe, it talks about in our book, at the end of the 5th step, we start to have this spiritual experience. And that was for me where it started. I had already demonstrated that I was starting to change, just in the way that I responded to things. When people would confront me and I was in situations, I learned to pray with my eyes open. I didn't know you could do that. But I certainly wasn't going to get down on my knees and pray. You kidding me? It wasn't an option then. I do it now, in the comfort of my own home, and but I wasn't going to do it in the environment that I was in. So I get to have this experience, and my world continues to get larger. My dad said that he was going to be there to pick me up. He had been diagnosed with this rare form of cancer while I was still, while I was still in jail waiting my time, which is another reason they really tried to reduce the sentencing. He said he was going to be there to pick me up, and he was. So we, against his doctor's orders, after already being through chemo and all types of things, he was there to pick me up. And right before I got released, I was at a camp there's a medium that was just going into minimum, and I had a guy there. His name was Bob. He was an outside guy. He's an outside volunteer who came in to carry a meeting to that facility, and he had done it for like 25, 29 years, still doing it to this day. We went through the steps, kind of, did a quick run through, and Bob was connected with Tom and Tom I. They knew a guy that knew a guy in Tennessee, because my parents had already moved from North Carolina to Tennessee. So I was happy to hear that Alcoholics Anonymous was in Tennessee as well, and I already had a contact, and his name was Scott. And Scott, who's my sponsor today, he was there. Like, I thought that AA was a mob or something. Like, you guys are everywhere, and sure enough, we kind of are. But Scott was there to meet me with open arms, and he really brought me into Nashville AA. And he gave me this hug that I'll never forget, because I wasn't used to being hugged, period. And he gave me, the hugs that you just, they're like very uncomfortable for the first time you get one. Now I embrace it and I love it, but I got scared for a second. Thankfully, he let go after I stopped squirming. But I love that man with my life today. We've had some incredible adventures. I got to see him go walk through with so much grace and dignity, and some trials and low spots with his health, and just amazing to see. I tell you what, I get so much respect and I get so much love from seeing the miracles happening in your lives. I miss them happening in mine, but I get to seeing them happening in yours without fail. So I get to Tennessee, and I had this feeling that my dad wasn't going to make it to my second year anniversary, and so I went to my home group at the time and was like, I would like to have a 1-year medallion. And I went home and I gave it to my dad, and I was sitting on the couch one night. I said, "Dear, this is for you." And he looked at it like it was like a 50-carat diamond. He was just like, wow. He knew exactly what it was. I'll tell you, I don't think he knew a single soul in this building, but he loved every single one of you, because he gave him his son back. And at the end of his life, was shortly thereafter, he didn't have to worry about me being in a seedy motel, living day to day, not wanting to wake up the next day, and I was right there and able to embrace the pain with my family and just be present, which has always been the most challenging thing for me. I went back, and I'm just going to fly through some highlights here, and I went back to that horticulture class. Triggered something in me, and I was 25 now. I got out. I was living at home. I didn't have to necessarily jump right back into a full-time job. My main priority was getting to meetings, and I was able to go back to school and take 2 classes at the community college down the road at Ball State. And something crazy happened. I started to do that thing where you show up and you do the work, and I got good grades. And I did it repeatedly so I did 2 classes the first semester, and then I jumped it up to 4 classes. And look at me, I'm 2 years sober, and I'm doing school. It's crazy. But I also knew that I needed to get involved in service, and so I got my home group. I needed to get involved, so I went to a business meeting, and I left the meeting at GSR. Didn't know what a GSR was. Just got out of prison. They hand me a check and tell me to go to the assembly, and I'm like, "What's an assembly? Do you know who I am?" Sure enough, they knew who I was, and I'll tell you, it just rocketed me onto another plane. Getting involved in the group service, this is the heartbeat. This is where the Bill calls it. This is where lives are being changed, and we get a front row seat to watch it happen. And it's not because of me, but I like to think that sometimes God will work through me in a way that I get to just be a little part, and it's significant, but a little part in this big miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a beautiful love story. one that I'm eternally grateful to be a character in. And one last thing I'll tell you, I told the story about the letter from GSO, and I was at a conference in New York, and at the end of the talk, they form a line and say thank you, no pressure here, but a guy came up to me and he was like, "Did the lady's name that signed your letter, was it Gail?" And I was like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was." And he's like, "Hold on one second." And he pulled out a phone and he gave me, and I got a chance to thank Gail for the letter that she wrote. And like so many of those things have happened. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to share with you, but just by sticking around and just hanging out with you guys and doing the work, I live a different life today. I truly do. I can't. They said the old man would drink again, and I thought that meant the old 50-year-olds that would hang out in those smoky church basements. But the old Matt will drink again, and unless something changes, the same man that walks into Alcoholics Anonymous will drink again. And I said, all right. So I did the work, and something changed through the process of these steps. God's come in, and as much as I'm allowing that power to lead the way and just kind of ride shotgun, man, some remarkable things are happening. But I don't want to take up any more of your wonderful evening. I hope there's a piece of cake over there because I could use one right now. I love you all. Thanks again for the opportunity.